Hi, my name is Stephanie Rush, and I've been a holistic wellness coach for over 12 years. I actually went through a really hard divorce about 12 years ago. And at the time, I had horrible habits. And it was to the point, someone that I cared very deeply about actually discouraged me and laughed at me when they asked me what I always wanted to do. And I told them that I wanted to be in fitness, and they actually chuckled because my habits were they weren't very good at the time. But from there, I went through a really bad divorce. And at the time, I had always admired the people in the industry. And a good friend of mine, actually, I was on my way to the gym, and they encouraged me to do a fitness competition. And from there, I was like, you know what? I was going through a really, really hard time. It was during during the recession, and I didn't. Oh, I didn't. I didn't expect to. I didn't want to go down a spiral of depression. Um, and so I decided to pour all that love in myself and do something positive for myself. And so, on the happier note, I decided to do a fitness competition. And in that time, I got somebody that gave me some tips and gave me her love and direction. And at the time, I was also doing some training myself. And so I took the knowledge that I had and I applied it with what she told me. And in 16 weeks, I was able to completely transform my body. And I'll never forget, I'd always admired all these women on the magazines and I had pages and pages. And then when I did this competition, I was the nobody. Nobody knew who I was. And I ended up placing top 5 with them. And I remember standing on stage. It was just a very rewarding moment for myself because nobody really knew what I was going through. When you go through things, I'm just the type of person who I was the type of person that just got to put my head down. And that season of life really taught me resilience. It taught me grit. It gave me something to focus on, something positive. And I was so grateful for it because looking back now, it was the biggest blessing. At that time, it gave me something to focus on, And, at the time when I went through my divorce, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I hadn't found my passions. And so when I found this, it lit me up and really just brought a new light to my life. And from there, I saw so many amazing things were impacted in my life. And from there, I decided that I wanted to help other women. And so from there, I started my journey, my wellness journey, not only for myself, but for other women. And from there, it transpired and it grew from not only just the movement of the body, the nourishment of the body, but also just realizing that the emotional weight and how that affected me through my journey, and realizing that, as women, we always beat ourselves up because we think, our food, and whether we have cravings or we have binging, we get down on ourselves. But going through that, I was able to connect the times when I was really, really sad to why I was just aimlessly eating. And I realized that I was basically eating my emotions. And so from there, I just really started to hone in and learn about, psychology and healing. And that was initially my first time just really speaking to God. I didn't have a relationship. I grew up Catholic, but it was more go and do what you're told and listen to the sermon. And I never really connected with God during that time. I'll never forget, I started going to church because I wanted to heal and I wanted to do better. And I didn't want to repeat things in my marriage moving forward. I wanted to heal. And I'll never forget, I was in church and I was going through a really, really hard time, and I was trying to figure it out on my own and try to do things my ways. And I thought I could handle it and I could figure it out. And some of the same things, I started even opening myself up to dating, and a lot of the same things started to happen. And I'll never forget, I was in church and I just surrendered, not willingly, not willingly, bawling, crying, praying, asking him to show me the way because I obviously didn't know how to do it. And from there, that's when my relationship started with God. And it's been a beautiful journey. I didn't think I was going to get this upset, but this is the beautiful thing about, your journey and your walk and your healing. Last year was a really hard, and it started off in March. I was in a really bad car accident. Thankfully, I walked away. Nobody was hurt and I wasn't hurt, but thankfully, it was funny. I was going for a photo shoot, funny enough. And I'll never forget is I took a selfie to put on my story just to promote that, hey, I'm getting ready for a photo shoot. I'm on my way out. And I'll never forget, it was like 8:15 that I took that because, you'll understand why I know that time. And I'll never forget, it wasn't 22 minutes later. I'm sitting on the side of the road. I'm looking at a 4-car collision. My car is upside down. I've been pulled from the car, and the ambulance and the sirens are going. And it was 20 minutes from the time that I took that photo. And it just really, I remember sitting there, and there's been so many amazing things that have happened in my life, not just that one, but in particular, where you just realize after the fact, usually in hindsight, wow, this was just such a blessing. But when you're going through it, it's really, really hard to see it at the time. But when you've been through several different things, this wasn't my first accident. I had previously been in a very terrible accident, and I walked away. I fell asleep at the wheel, crossed 4 lanes of oncoming traffic, hit the curb, flipped over, smashed into a tree, and smashed into a wall. And they said the only thing that was keeping me alive is because I fell asleep. And it was in that moment that I realized that it happened again. And I remember sitting on the side of the road this last time, and I just said, God, what are you here to teach me? And I just sat there. I didn't know the answer because we don't know it when we're in it. Like I said, we learn afterwards. And like I said, I'm stubborn. And from there, he just taught me a beautiful, one of the things that after I looked at all the different accidents that I've been in with my mom and, and my brother actually messaged me and he said, you're the only person that I know that's flipped a car multiple times. And it just made me really realize that I'm stubborn. I had to sit back and really look and say that God wants you here. You could have been gone several times in your life. And God has you here for a reason and for a purpose. And that was the first time it really sat in to really, just really hit home and really hit home for me to really understand, like, you're here for a purpose. Like, you're here for a reason. You're still here. And so from there, a lot of times when things like that happen, it's a shock right at the beginning, and thank goodness I wasn't hurt. But I don't like to learn the hard way. I like to learn and just take that with me and not make the mistakes again. And although we're not perfect, but fast forward a little bit later, so I had this new sense of like this chance and this amazing enlightenment that I'm here and that, I could have lost my life. That life is so delicate and you don't know, within 20 minutes, I could have not been here. And when you go through something like that, it really, I'll back it up. I'm sorry. I'll back it up because when I got in the car accident, someone swerved me off the road. And I swerved to the left, and as all I could see is we were going about 50 miles an hour. And when I swerved to the left, I saw a car in front of me stopping. And so I swerved into the median, and I knew I was going to hit. And so as I went, I braced because I've been through this before. I braced with both hands. I braced the steering wheel, and I knew I was going to hit. And so the first time I hit, I hit and I just grabbed the steering wheel and I put my head between my arms, and I just put my head down. And I just braced myself because I knew. And in that time, you get hit, and I'm tumbling and I'm flipping, and you're getting hit from the left and you're getting hit from the right. And you don't know when it's going to end. And eventually, thank God, it did end. And I was okay, but I was upside down, and a passerby actually pulled me out of the car. But after you go through something like that, you really sit back and you really evaluate your life, and thankfully I was able to do it, not injured and nobody else injured. But when you go through that, it really just, you come back to your life, and I remember walking into my house and I was like, I could not have been here. And you look around and you look at your house, you look at the things, and you question, you know that had I not been here, this is what my loved ones would have found. And, you think about what that would have done to them and how that would have changed their life. But more importantly, it makes you really think, it makes you take an audit of your life, and if this was my last day, would I have been happy with what I had left? And I think that's something that so many people don't learn it until they learn it the hard way. And, I looked at my life and I was actually, believe it or not, I was actually really, really happy because I don't have enemies. I wake up and I love everybody the way I would want to love myself. I'm doing what I love. We could always have, maybe not at the capacity, but I'm in that direction. So you take that moment and it really just is a gut check. Am I living my passions? Am I doing what I love? Does my life have purpose? Does my life have meaning? And then you also walk out into this world and it's very different. Everything just, it's almost like you got a second chance. And you move through the world, hopefully, continuously, as if knowing that it could have been your last. And so from there, I did, and it took me a moment, and obviously, you move with more intention. You really just dive into your purpose and what your meaning is and what you're really here for. And then fast forward, oh gosh, a few months later, and a dear friend of mine took his life. And like I said, this person, he was chasing his passions, he was chasing his dreams. And he had gotten the life, he'd just bought his dream home. And unfortunately, his mental health that he'd been silently battling for so long, unfortunately got the best of him, and he took his life. And I'll never forget sitting there, and I actually have his picture behind me to remind me that life is very precious. And just like I said, I always want to try to learn from every moment that happens to me. And I keep that and I look at that every day as a reminder, not only for him, but to continue to not take, these things for granted. And so that was another instance in my life where God just kind of sat me down and really just made me kind of take a look. And it was a second, I told you I'm stubborn. It was a second tap on my shoulder. I just kept hearing God whisper, it's time. It's time. And fast forward, and my father in September, just like most people, he kind of had fallen off his health habits after the pandemic, and just wasn't really taking care of himself. And I remember I had the day with him on Sunday, and I looked over at him and I was like, he just doesn't look good. And unfortunately, the next day he had a stroke. And it just really, again, when I have these things and I go through these things, I've gone through them so many times where now I'm just like, what are you going to teach us? What's the blessing? To the point you get to a point in your life where there's so many blessings that come out of this, that it's you just roll with it and you take it day by day, and you just understand, you trust that there's something beautiful that's going to come out of this. And thankfully my dad, he's in recovery. But in that time, we had a lot of turbulence in our family. Um, and it brought not only my relationship with my father closer, um, but it brought my family together, in times where we just were really just kind of going our separate ways in certain ways. And I just saw God working through this moment, bringing us together and just really waking us up to the time that it's time. Like, we don't have a lot of time. And you just never know, in the blink of an eye, within 24 hours or a moment's breath, you just never know what can happen. And, that was the fourth thing that happened to me last year, where just really just God's just telling me, Steph, it's time. It's time. And for me, I had been putting off things, certain things in my life, in my career. And, after seeing all that, and I had my beautiful niece, my second niece was born, I just looked at how precious life is, and God was just telling me the same message over and over and over again, and in that time, when you're deep down and like going through things, like, it's such a blessing to be able to know that you can speak to somebody, because a lot of people don't have that. So when you have God to be able to speak to, when you feel lonely, you feel secluded, you feel isolated, and he's always listening. He might be quiet sometimes, but he's always listening. It was just very freeing, and I saw the blessings, and I saw how it was bringing me closer to my faith even more than I thought. Just, as you said, we're not born perfect, and even through our journey, we're not perfect, and I'm still learning. I'm always learning. But I always stayed close to my faith, and that's what got me through a lot of this, is just knowing that he's there and that there is a blessing. Sometimes we don't understand it at the time, but there is a blessing, and I know that he's using me for the greater good. And, I thank God every day to be able to do what I do. And it actually puts so much power behind what I do for a living, helping people, because there's so much importance to that. That it just really, really just instilled a belief and a conviction in why I love what I do and why I want to help people. And it's all intertwined. I mean, spirituality and like your faith is a huge part of it. I think that's something that a lot of people are, they're spiritually deficient. And I think that it's what people don't understand. It's a huge part of it. It's a huge part of your fulfillment in life and your joy. And I think a lot of people are missing that. My relationship with Christ, it means so much. It's a foundation that I didn't have growing up. It's home to me. It's accountability. It's grace. It's love. It's forgiving. It's unconditional love. It's filtering out the stuff and nourishing the parts of me that he was always there to do for me, but I was resistant. It's love. It's just love is what it is. Knowing that you have someone guiding you and leading you, and knowing that no matter what, like if you just, there's principles that I've learned that I didn't learn growing up, I didn't grow up, like I said, my mom tried to do her best to instill that in us, but it was just basically go to church because we're supposed to on Sunday, go on the holidays. And so now church, gosh, it's a community. It's a beautiful new foundation that my life is on. It's a trust. It's a strength that I can lean on. And it's direction, like I said, when you don't have that growing up, my parents did the best that they could to raise me, but unfortunately they didn't have a lot of direction themselves. And so it's God is there for me as my father, is like, who I speak to and who I lean on when I'm alone, and I think you need to, I know you need to have that. Every person needs to have that in their life, because we're all going through something. And we can't handle those things on our own. And we need to be able to have that person to speak to and know that when we're going through this, that we can talk to him and that our prayers are being listened to and they are being answered, not always in the way that we think, not always the way that we want. Um, but there's a beautiful blessing that, in every part of our life, and there is a path and there is direction. And as long as we stay close to that, you know, um, which we're always going to stray, we're not perfect. I definitely stray myself, but it's just, it's love. It's love is what it is for me.